Welcome to the Vue Dropdown Tree component tutorial. The Syncfusion Vue Dropdown Tree displays a hierarchical list of predefined values, from which you can choose and display a single value in a text box. In this video, I will show you how to add this Syncfusion Vue Dropdown Tree component to a Vue app. I will also show you how to bind JSON data and remote data to the component, and select multiple items using checkboxes. I will start with the Vue application creation process using the Vue v command. Make sure you have installed the latest versions of Vue and Node.js. To create a project in Vue, open Visual Studio Code, type the npm create v at latest command, and provide the app name, my Vue app. Next, choose Vue as the framework, and JavaScript as the variant. The Vue project is created. I navigate to the newly created Vue app and install the required dependencies using the npm install command. Now, the application is configured with the default settings of a Vue project. To add the Syncfusion Vue Dropdown Tree component, install the Syncfusion Vue Dropdowns package using the npm install at syncfusion/ej2 Vue Dropdowns --save command. This command will install the package with its dependencies. The next thing I must do here is to register the trial license key to use Syncfusion components. I open the main.js file and import the register license method from the Syncfusion ej2 base package. Using this method, I register the trial license key. To generate this license key, refer to the link in the description below. To add the Dropdown Tree component, I open the @vue file and remove the default code. After that, import the Dropdown Tree component from the Syncfusion Vue Dropdowns package and register it globally along with its child directives. To add CSS reference for the Vue Dropdown Tree component, I need to import the necessary CSS references. So, in the style tag, I import the material theme reference for the Dropdown Tree component and the dependent CSS references like inputs and navigations. I add the Dropdown Tree component inside the template tag by adding EJ's Dropdown Tree tag. Then, define an array, local data, and assign an array of objects with ID and name fields. Here, I define the ID field to set a unique ID for the node, and the name field to display the text. Then, define the fields variable and assign this local data array to the data source property. The appropriate data source fields need to be mapped to this Dropdown Tree component. So, map the field's ID to value and name to text properties. Next, assign this field's variable to the fields property of the Dropdown Tree. This data source contains a list of folders, so I define the placeholder property with the value, select a folder. To align the Dropdown Tree component, I add the width attribute and margin bottom property with a custom value. Save the changes and run the application using the npm run dev command. Look at the Dropdown Tree. It shows folder names in the pop-up and a short description. Next, I will show you how to customize the pop-up height and width. I set the pop-up height property to 200 pixels and pop-up width property to 250 pixels. See, now the pop-up is displayed with a custom height and width. Next, I will show you how to add subnodes to the main nodes. To do that, within this local data object, I add one more field, subchild, with the field's ID and name. The ID field sets a unique ID for the subnode, and the name provides a text to display. Now assign this subchild field to the child property within the field's variable. When the node is expanded, the corresponding subnodes are also displayed. By default, nodes are collapsed initially. To expand them, set the expanded property to true to the local disk C item and its sub-items. Looking here, the subnodes of the first node are expanded initially. So far, you have seen how to bind local JSON data to display it in a hierarchical drop-down tree. Now I will show you how to bind data from a remote data source that contains self-referential data. Let's look at this self-referential example data to understand its structure. In addition to the usual ID and text fields, you will see objects with two additional fields, parent ID and hasChildren. This hasChildren field indicates whether a parent node has child nodes or not. The parent ID field maps the appropriate parent node's ID to its child nodes. Notice here, these three objects have an additional field parent ID with the value 1, which indicates that they render as child nodes. To bind the remote data, I will use the Syncfusion Data Manager component. This acts as a gateway between the drop-down tree and remote data source, and uses queries to interact with them. So, as a first step, I import the data manager and the required adapter from the Syncfusion EJ2 data package. I initialize an instance for the data manager called remote data with properties like URL adapter and cross-domain. In the URL, I assign an already available remote service URL which will retrieve the collection of data tables through the post method. I will fetch data from these entities, employees, and orders and bind them to the drop-down tree. Also, I have set OData v4 adapter here as the URL is assigned to an existing OData service. And the cross-domain option is set to true to allow the cross-origin domain request. Next, to write individual queries to fetch data for both parent and child nodes, I define a variable data query of type query for the parent node. I fetch the employee ID, first name, and title from the employees table. Like the parent data, I also write a query for the child node. So I define a variable child data query of type query, retrieve the fields order ID, ship name, and employee ID from the orders table. I also import this query class from the Syncfusion data package to access it. Next, I map the remote data source fields to the appropriate fields properties by defining an object name remote data fields and assigning this remote data object to the data source property. I set the data query variable to the query property and map the field employee ID to the value property and first name to the text property. Next, define hasChildren property and assign the employee ID field to identify whether the nodes have child items. If that field contains a value, then that particular object is identified as a parent node. To map child nodes fields, add the child property and assign the object remote data to the data source property. Then, assign the child data query to the query property, map the order ID field from the orders table to the value property, and the ship name field to the text property. As already seen, the parent node data is retrieved from the employee table to identify the parent to whom the child nodes belong. So I define the parent value property for the child node data source and map it to the employee ID field. Then set this remote data fields object to the fields property and change the placeholder property value to select a name. See, the drop-down tree component displays the employee's name as the parent node item and the respective ship names as the sub-items. Notice here, I can select only one item and display only one item. To select multiple items, set the Allow Multi-Selection property to true. See here, I can now select multiple items. Next, to enable checkboxes, I set the Show Checkbox property to true. See, the nodes are displayed with checkboxes. Here I can check any node and it will be selected and displayed on the UI. Next, to select all the subnodes of the main node, add the tree settings object in the data method and set the auto check property to true. Then, assign this object to the tree settings property. Look here, when I check the main node, all the subnodes are selected and displayed in the UI. In this video, I have shown you how to add the drop-down tree component to a Vue application. I also showed you some basic features like JSON and remote data binding, and selecting multiple items using checkboxes. If you want to see a working example, you can download it from the GitHub link in the description below. I have also shared a link to learn about obtaining a free license key to use our Vue products through our community license. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel.